Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the April 15th, 2014 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. A very sad day indeed because, of course, it is tax day. So I'm sorry about that. But I am not sorry to have the privilege of calling this meeting to order. There are copies of our agenda on either side of the room. If you haven't already had an opportunity to pick one up, please do so. You can follow along with our proceedings tonight. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment, both with respect to items that are on our agenda tonight, as well as a section under item 4, which is reserved for public comments of a general nature with respect to matters that are not appearing on tonight's agenda. So at this point in time, I would like to invite everyone to join us in something very special. It is our custom to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, and tonight we have some very special guests with us who are going to help us in leading the pledge. We have Girl Scout Troop 50246 from Kingsley School here in Downers Grove, who are going to come up, a bunch of very fine, inquisitive young ladies, who are going to come up and help us lead the pledge today. So ladies, if you would please join me up front, and gentlemen, please. We'll wait till you all get up here. You can spread on out. Spread out a little bit on the stairs. And now something very important, you need to turn around because the flag's behind me. And we're going to say the pledge. Ready? 1, 2, 3. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Terrific. Thank you very much. Now you might want to stay there just for a second for a quick picture, because you'll see that camera stand. You want to make sure the folks at home can see you on TV. Because in the 21st century, if it's not on TV, Facebook, or Twitter, it just didn't happen. All right, thank you very much, ladies. Thank you for coming. Thank you. That was a terrific pledge. I think we're going to adopt that cadence next time. I think that's a nice change of pace. I like that. All right, with that, thank you once again. I'd like to ask our fine village clerk, April Holden, to please call the roll.
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Rankin?
Here.
Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Here.
Commissioner Durkin?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. It brings us item 3 on our agenda, which pertains to minutes of council meetings. We have one set of minutes from a prior meeting to adopt tonight, and those are our meeting minutes, from our regular council meeting of April 8th, 2014. Are there any changes, questions, comments, or corrections from any members of the village council with respect to those minutes? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Terrific. Now, before we get to public comments, I do have some proclamations that I have the privilege of reading tonight. And let me start with the first one. And if we really believe really hard, it just might come true, and that would be spring. And we can get rid of that white, wet stuff that's outside. This proclamation pertains to Arbor Day. Whereas the last Friday in April has been designated as Arbor Day to encourage the planting of trees and the protection from insects and disease that destroy their beauty and usefulness. Whereas trees add much to our community by providing beauty, helping reduce heating and cooling bills, increasing property values, enhancing the economic vitality of business areas, and improving the quality of life for years to come. And whereas the Village of Downers Grove has received national recognition for the 30th year for its tree care program by being named once again a Tree City USA, now therefore I, Martin T. Tully, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim Friday, April 25th, 2014 to be Arbor Day in the Village of Downers Grove and urge all residents to care for their trees. Just a quick comment on this proclamation. Over the weekend, the Morton Arboretum, which is one of the gems in our area, held their annual Arbor Day 10K. It's a gorgeous path throughout the entire Arboretum. Too bad there weren't a whole lot of leaves just yet, so fortunately they do another one in the fall where you get to see a lot more color, and that one of course is called the Fall Color 10K. So happy Arbor Day to everyone. Hopefully we'll be seeing a little bit more of the trees. Now, the second proclamation I have pertains to, and we have a number of also special guests here tonight from Midwestern University, some of our fine medical students here in town. They are here tonight to receive a proclamation that I will be providing, which is in support of National Osteopathic Awareness Week. and if I mispronounce any of this, I'm sure you're all going to call me on it, so I'm going to be looking over in that corner. Whereas osteopathic physicians, or DOs, okay, now that I don't understand. You can explain that to me later. Whereas osteopathic physicians are concerned with the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of human illnesses, disease, and injury. Whereas in their treatment practices, DOs consider not only the patient's physical well-being, but also the mental, emotional health, nutritional needs, work-related stress, the home environment, and other factors that affect health. And whereas a doctor of osteopathic medicine, now I get it, is a fully trained physician who prescribes drugs, performs surgery, and uses all scientifically accepted methods to maintain and restore the health of his or her patients while employing the additional modality of osteopathic manipulative medicine, a hands-on approach to diagnosis and treatment. And whereas osteopathic medicine is one of the fastest growing healthcare fields in the nation and focuses on primary care. Whereas Downers Grove is proud to be the home of one of the nation's finest osteopathic colleges, the Chicago College of Osteopathic Medicine, CCOM, which educates more than 800 pre-doctoral and 200 postdoctoral students each year. And whereas CCOM students are committed to providing service to the Downers Grove community through health fairs, outreach projects, and special events. And whereas CCOM has been training excellent and compassionate physicians to meet the healthcare needs of society for 113 years, now therefore I, Martin T. Tully, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim April 13th through 19th, 2014 as National Osteopathic Awareness Week in the Village of Downers Grove, and urge all citizens and community organizations to recognize the healthcare services provided by osteopathic physicians. And Sean, I think we have a representative who's going to come up and accept the proclamation, or all of you are welcome to come up, whatever you would prefer. Please come on up. Why not? We avoided the battle over the front row between the Girl Scouts and the doctoral students. I didn't want to see how that one was going to turn out. Commissioner Neustadt had his money on the Girl Scouts. Why don't you come on up front here? I'll get you all up here. There's some room on the other side. How are you? I'm well. Good to see you. Thanks for coming. Nice to see you. How are you? Thank you for coming. Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming. Oh, we can't read the banner. Hold on a second. How are you? Nice to see you. Thanks for coming. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you very well. All right, so we'll get the banner up. Here, we'll do it this way. There we go.
Make sure you show this photo to Dr. G.
All right, there we go. We'll get the proclamation in the picture too. Terrific. Well, thank you very much. And if anyone would like to share a few words at the podium, I would invite you to do so. If you have a spokesperson, no obligation, entirely up to you. Other than that, thank you for coming. The podium's right there. I'll yield the floor to you. I'll let you guys hang out here for a second. Thank you very much for coming.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Murray. I'm a first-year medical student at Midwestern University. I would like to just express my gratitude to the council for letting us attend this meeting today. Midwestern University has been a part of the Downers Grove community since 1988, so over 25 years now. And this week, April 13th to the 19th, is National Osteopathic Medicine Week. And we are striving to promote the decisive and preventative care that osteopathic physicians provide for their patients. Not only are we striving to increase awareness of the profession, but we are trying to incorporate giving back to the community throughout this week. Over this week, we have collaborated with Pierce Downers Elementary School, Ronald McDonald House, and this Thursday, we're going to be conducting a mini medical school at Eisenhower Junior High. And I think I could speak for all the students and that we really appreciate giving back to the community. And again, I'd just like to thank you in promoting this auspicious week for us. Again, thank you so much.
Terrific. Thank you. And I know it was in the proclamation, but we do really appreciate all the community service that we see out of all the fine folks at New Western University and all the various colleges. It's greatly appreciated on behalf of the community and the Village Council and Village Downers Grove. Thank you, good to see you, and good luck with all your pursuits. Thank you for being here. Terrific. Well, that brings us to the end of the proclamations we have tonight, and we'll move right to item 4, which is our section reserved for public comment, questions and comments of a general nature with respect to items that are not appearing on our agenda tonight. The protocol is anyone who has a question or comment, we invite you to please come down to the podium, give us your name and address, and we would welcome hearing from you. So if there are any members of the audience who at this time would like to ask a question or make a comment of a general nature, I would invite you to please come down to the podium. Please. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. Frank Falish, 820 Prairie, Downers Grove. There are 2 houses under construction in the northeast corner of Prairie and Washington. There's a placard listing items like times allowed for construction, as well as an item saying that the walks and streets should be kept clean. I assume this is a requirement and should be enforced. That brings us to the fact that the sidewalks and streets have been dirty for the 3 months construction has continued. The construction was not simultaneous on both houses. The 840 Prairie unit started about a month before the other one did. This means that the building inspectors have visited the site at least four times. Do the inspectors belong to the Chinese school of monkeys, see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil? Why didn't they ask the contractors to clean up the site and keep it clean? Will the new owners have to pay extra for the stormwater because of the construction? There was one house on 2 lots, and the northwest corner was low, and it was great for stormwater because it held a lot of stormwater. That area has now been filled in, and they have a detached garage there. And in place, they've installed 2 new area drains that will drain directly into the sewer on Washington Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Falish, for sharing those concerns. They've obviously been communicated to the village staff through your comments, and we'll take a look at it and see if there's further action that justifies following up. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. Other questions or comments from any members of the audience? Any questions or comments of a general nature? Very well, hearing none, we'll come to item 5, which is designated for council member reports of items of public interest or goings on in the community. So I'll start with Commissioner Jose and ask if you have any items you'd like to share with everyone collected here today.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me, I just wanted to make everyone aware that on Sunday, April the 27th at 3:30, Lemon Tree Grocer is hosting a gluten-free awareness program. Folks can go and find out information about having a gluten-free diet and get information on gluten sensitivities, gluten intolerance, things like that. And it's being put on in conjunction with Clarendon Chiropractic. So if you want any more information on that, you can visit ClarendonChiro.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rankin?
Yes, the applications to have a float in the 4th of July parade, you can do that already online, even though it seems very far away. And the Community Events Commission has been trying to get more floats and more people involved. So this is just a reminder that if you're a business in town, you can have a float in the parade. You can also bring your neighborhood block party group and have a float. They had some really interesting entries last year, and we're hoping to increase that. So you can go to the Village of Downers Grove website, and you can look up the online registration form for registering for a parade float. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. Commissioner Durkin?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just want to wish everyone a very happy Easter. If you're traveling, safe travels. If you haven't done all your Easter shopping yet, please remember us here in the Village of Downers Grove. We have very fine stores for your Easter egg hunt and for your gifts. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Barnett?
I have nothing, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Olson?
I didn't think I had anything, but then I realized we don't have another council meeting until May 6th. So just wanted to remind everyone that the Downers Grove Chamber is hosting the Taste of 630 with various area restaurants on May 1st at 5 p.m. at Yorktown Mall. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Newstead.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple things. Last night I was able to attend the Downers Grove School District 58 Board of Education meeting. At that meeting, they discussed an intergovernmental agreement with the village for asphalt paving. It was a really good discussion, a good mood, and a great partnership between the village and School District 58. If a moment of selfish pleasure, Mayor, if I would like to congratulate my brother Matt. He was announced as the principal for Herrick Middle School and will take that position starting in the fall of next school year, so congratulations to him. Moving back to village business, on April 26th, the Village of Downers Grove, in partnership with Accurate Document Destruction, will host a paper shredding event here at Village Hall from 8 a.m. until noon. I know I've got a few bags of documents and old tax stuff that we just came across today as tax day. That'll be great to be shredded. So that's a free event for our residents. You can find more information on our website, downers.us. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, and please give our best wishes of congratulations to Principal Newstead.
Thank you. I will.
It's a fine school. The only thing I'll point out at this juncture is that the 2014-2015 Downtown Downers Grove Business Directory is hot off the presses, and if you haven't already picked up a copy, you should head downtown and maybe in conjunction with your Easter shopping, as Commissioner Durkin says, and pick up a copy. And you might be surprised. There's a lot of new businesses that have come into the downtown. Some that I know my colleagues have been at various ribbon cuttings. Once the weather ever breaks, we'll look forward to seeing everyone downtown and support our local businesses.
I heard we're allowing sleighs this year on the 4th of July.
Bite your tongue, sir. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 6, which is reserved for public hearings. We have no public hearings tonight, so I will turn to item 7, which is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any items on the consent agenda? Seeing none, questions or comments from any members of the Village Council? Commissioner Durkin?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just want to highlight Resolution 00-0555. That is the letter K on the agenda, page 2. That's in reference to the Indian Boundary YMCA agreement that we will be voting on. I support this. I'm just happy to see that we've come to this. I know that village staff, volunteer organizations, such as the Downers Grove Rotary Club, have proven themselves over the years where we've been in a position to grant 3-year agreements with these organizations, just like we did several years ago for the Grove Fest. I'm glad to see that we're in a position that we'll be voting on and supporting the YMCA of Downers Grove for their Downers Grove Market Days, which actually start May 10th through October 18th this year. And I know it's a customary practice that we have coffee with council there. And I'm just happy to see that we've gotten to the level that we can have this agreement, because this agreement not only is for better cost savings, but also reduces the cost of labor and operations. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments on any of the items on the consent agenda from members of the Village Council? I just want to pick up on what Commissioner Durkin said. The Indian Boundary YMCA has worked very closely with both the Village and Downtown Management Corporation for a number of years on an increasingly successful downtown market. It's really been a staple, or become a staple in the community, and very popular during the better weather. By May 10th, we certainly hope you have some. And we have, I want to compliment both them and our own staff for working together closely to come up with creative ways to continue to enhance that community benefit that we all appreciate in a way that makes sense and is most economical for the Indian Boundary YMCA. Appreciate you bringing forward this solution. I know it's a conversation that's been going on for some time, and it's nice to see that it's an outcome that everyone's supportive of and pleased with. So I appreciate all the hard work. And with that, I'll ask for a roll call.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Thank you. The consent agenda is passed unanimously. That brings us to item 8 on our agenda, which is our active agenda. We have several items on our active agenda. First one is item 8A as in apple. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance amending planned development number 17, Finley Square Shopping Center, to allow the construction of a coffee shop with a drive-through at 1500-1570 Butterfield Road?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the audience on this item? Any questions or comments from members of the village council? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, the matter passes unanimously. That brings us to item 8B as in boy. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance authorizing a special use for 1500-1570 Butterfield Road to permit construction of a coffee shop with a drive-through use?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from members of the audience? Questions or comments from members of the village council? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. That matter also passes unanimously. It brings us to item 8C as in Charlie. Do I have a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing a final plat of subdivision for 1500-1570 Butterfield Road?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions from the audience? Any questions from members of the council? May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. That matter also passes unanimously and brings us to the last item on our active agenda tonight, item 8D as in David. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance rezoning property located at 2540 Burlington from R1 Single Family Residence to R4 Single Family Residence?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from members of the audience on this item? Last chance, Kingsley School, no questions on this? All right. We're only going to pass it if you're okay with it. Questions or comments from the council? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. The matter also passes unanimously and brings us to the end of our active agenda, and that brings us to item 9, our first reading or our workshop agenda, which we usually use to introduce items for discussion and consideration. No action at this time, but action at a future point in time. We have 2 items under our first reading or workshop agenda tonight, and as is customary, I will ask village staff, Manager David Fieldman, to please introduce the items.
Thank you, Mayor Tully. The first item for consideration is an ordinance amending Chapter 5 of the Municipal Code regarding animal and hen regulations. This is affectionately known as the chicken ordinance, but now it's been changed to the animal and hen regulations. The council's been discussing potential changes to regulations regarding keeping of chickens for well over a year now, and based on that discussion, we have prepared a draft ordinance for further discussion and debate among the council and community. The terms of that draft ordinance are all displayed on the screen in front of you. And if you've been following, these are very familiar and are self-evident, so I won't go through them, but we will leave the key terms of the draft ordinance on the screen as we go through any further discussion and questions. And with that, the staff is happy to answer any questions you may have.
Sure. Thank you very much for introducing this. Obviously, this is a discussion that's been going on for some time. A lot of these elements have been discussed before to some extent. As I understand, what we're trying to accomplish tonight is talk about the parameters of a consent-based ordinance, which was the majority direction that was discussed last time we considered this. And there are various buckets of issues that would be associated with an ordinance. And I know that staff has at least, to get the conversation going, put up some suggested beginning points. If any of us have different views on how those things might change, we could view it as a slider scale. We can make adjustments, but I think that rather than stare at a blank screen, staff thought it would facilitate a better conversation if there were at least some categories of attributes that we should entertain, and if there's any questions or suggestions to alter them, that we can have that conversation tonight. Before opening it up for conversation, I'll start off myself, and I just will confirm that I think we've said this every meeting where we've discussed this ordinance, that what we're talking about would apply to, would not, I mean, this would not, for the most part, we're talking about additional properties that would have the ability to maintain hens, I'll have to get used to that, hens on their property, because we've had an ordinance for some 30 years that has already allowed it on other properties. And other than a couple of items such as no rooster requirement and the maximum number of hens, we're not, for lack of a better word, tinkering with the existing state of affairs. We're talking about an additional amount of properties who would be allowed to do this above and beyond what currently exists.
That is correct.
And I wasn't necessarily looking at you, although I'm facing you, Mr. Fieldman. I was just reiterating that as something that I believe we've pretty much stated as our intention in every meeting where we've addressed this. But with that, I'll open it up to questions, comments from any members of the council. Commissioner Rankin.
Well, I have to say, I'm just thrilled that it's to this point. It's been a long road. The one thing I would ask my colleagues to potentially consider is that last section of E, where it says permit renewal every 5 years, that possibly if there are no code enforcement issues related to the chicken license permit, whatever we decide to call it, and that no neighbor ownership has changed, that person, if they had their neighbor consent, is allowed to keep, possibly like resubmit their application with a fee if there is a fee to process the application, but without having to obtain the neighbor consent again.
So that I understand it, basically talking about a situation where a typical house would have, say, let's just say 5 neighbors. One to the left, one to the right, one behind, and the 2 diagonal. If 5 years later, everybody still had the same neighbors and the same property owners, and they had all previously given consent, there wouldn't be a need to go back and get it again, absent some kind of violation or issue or problem that had come up over that period of time.
Or property transfer.
Right, assuming the same owners. Assuming the same owners.
And a violation associated with their chickens on their
Hens.
Hence, right.
Excuse
So
me.
some other violation wouldn't count, it would just be
Yeah.
that violation. That sounds fine to me, and probably, I wouldn't even wait 5 years, but I can support that.
I can support that too. I think, sorry, Sean, if you were raising your hand.
I support it.
I agree with Commissioner Rankin. We're at a point where we can make a decision. We've given direction. We've talked about it. We've talked about it. We've talked about it. Let's get some real Downers Grove experience. See how it affects our community. See how it affects our residents and visitors and everybody in our community. I think we'll get a lot of very firsthand experience from not only the hen owners but also from the neighbors, both adjacent and not. And from then, as with most every ordinance, we have the ability to then adjust, amend, reconfigure, change, do whatever we need to do to make it work or not. And I think we're at that point. We've been talking about this for over a year, and I think action is ready. I would suggest to my colleagues to, I don't normally say something so bold as this, but be ready to vote in our next meeting, which is the first meeting in May. We'll have plenty of time between now and then to discuss any conversation that comes out of tonight's meeting, but I'm really looking forward to doing it, and I think then it will allow residents to begin pursuit of having hens this season, so we get that firsthand experience right away. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Hozek?
Thank you, Mayor. I actually would go in the other direction on that proposal. I don't like the idea that the consent is irrevocable absent a code violation or turnover in neighbors. So I think everybody's experience is going to be a little different. Someone might think that, okay, this isn't going to be a problem. Maybe they do end up having an issue with the smell or noise or something. I mean, who knows? Everybody's threshold for what is bothersome to them is going to be different. And I think until we have the experience that Commissioner Neustadt talked about, we won't really know, what everybody's threshold is and how that's going to be different. So I would prefer not to go in that direction. I'd like to see the consent stay around. And in fact, rather than go with 5 years, I'd like to see it more like 1 or 2 years, because 5 years is an awful long time if you find the activity going on next door to be bothersome. Other than that, the only other thing that I would put on the requirements is that I'd like to see the coop be closer to your home than one of your neighbor's homes. I think there probably aren't too many situations in the village where this would become operative, but I think it's possible that you've got one lot that's particularly deep and another lot where the house sits further back, and if you were to locate the coop toward the back of your lot, it could be significantly closer to your neighbor than it would be to you. And if they're your hens, I need to get used to that as well. I think they should be closer to your home than they are to any of your neighbor's homes. So but other than that, I think this is a very good first shot at the ordinance, and I look forward to bringing this to a conclusion. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments? Otherwise, I am going to ask the Girl Scouts what they think. Just kidding. Although I am going to take public comment, so watch out. The only thing I'll mention is we have talked about this for some time, and for those who may not have been following it all along, we've had a significant divergence of views with respect to this topic, and we're now at the point where there's been some consensus, or at least majority direction. I won't go back and talk about the whole concept of consent period, which, because obviously the will of the majority has been to go forward with a consent requirement of some type. So here we are, and now it's about, I agree with Commissioner Newstead 100%, we now need to move forward and bring this to resolution, even if it doesn't reflect what each of us would like. And I think somebody once said that if it's a solution that everyone's unhappy with, it might be a pretty decent solution. Or maybe not, we'll find out. But I would take a little bit of umbrage is the wrong word, about whether we have an experience, because as I mentioned earlier, we have 30 years of experience of people keeping hens in the village of Downers Grove, and so I think we actually do know a great deal about this topic. And I do understand, though, that there is some desire by some to the extent there are going to be additional people that are going to keep hens. We don't have experience with that, although I would suggest that the marginal incremental experience isn't going to teach us much more than we already know. But if we can get this on the books and get going and allow some people to do what they currently can't, I think we're all going to come back, and whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years, and we're all going to think, well, gee, this was a whole lot of flap about not much of anything. But I understand we have to be at that point to have the benefit of hindsight. So I agree with Commissioner Newstead. Moving this forward, and whatever tweaks and adjustments we want to make, let's do it, and let's move forward. Workshop, go for it.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, there is a certain amount of experience in the village with folks owning chickens, but by and large, they're on much larger lots than what would be allowed under this change in the ordinance. So I think there is a difference to it. When you're talking about a lot that is large enough under the current code, you're talking about a setback that's at least 50 feet from each of your neighbors. And there are plenty of lots in the village that are only 75 or even 50 feet wide. So this is a different experience than with a lot of significantly larger size.
I agree that there is a geographic difference, and as Commissioner Barnett were sitting next to you instead of where he is, you would have a different experience. But we're talking 50 feet. I understand it, but again, I
don't mean to laugh.
I think it's important to move this forward.
Well, my question, I guess, is if we have ideas for changes, like I presented one and Commissioner Jose presented one, do we need to kind of get a consensus of enough people to make those changes, or how are we going to move forward with any modifications to this?
That's a fair question. I was trying to see if we could get what the changes were out of people,
Okay.
and then we'll go back and see. I got two right now. One would
Okay.
be, yours is pretty clear, Commissioner Rankin. It would be that after 5 years, if there had been no property change of ownership,
Yeah, property transfer.
and no issues, violations, whatever you want to call it, with respect to the permit issued for that hen keeper, then they wouldn't have to go get consent again. I heard 4 people say they'd be fine with that, so I think we may have more. but I think there's 4 people who are in favor of that change. I'm hearing staff hearing that I'm seeing that staff heard that change.
Yes.
And that's fine, because I think that would actually reduce the consent requirement. And in my opinion, anything that reduces the consent requirement, we could reduce to eliminate it as far as I'm concerned. So that's fine with me. The other point was Commissioner Jose's request, I think probably needs a little bit more definition in order for it to be affected. But as I understood it, you would want the coop to be located closer to the permit holders' residence than their neighbors. And I guess then the question would be if there's support for that concept, and again, I don't know if I view it as 6 of this or half dozen of the other, not to use another egg reference, but I guess the question would then be how would we define that? Did you have something in mind as how that would be?
Well, I think by and large, a setback is going to take care of that, the 7-foot setback on either side. But in the case of a particularly deep lot, it's, I would imagine, a measure of simply walking it off.
So it would just have to be whatever the lot was, so let's say it was I'm just trying to understand how this would be enforceable and easy to measure. I would think that we would probably want to have some set amount, because otherwise every lot, somebody would have to go out and walk it off. And if we had one lot that was 300 deep, I guess they'd have to be 149 feet back instead of 151 feet back.
Mayor, may I suggest that these two things are kind of working against each other. I think I understand Commissioner Jose's point about duration, and 5 years is a long time. And then if you remove that reapplication situation, now you've got a struggle. In my mind, the distance, the setback thing is really controlled by consent. I mean, it's 7 feet, or don't make it 7 feet, don't get your neighbor's consent. But when we remove then the sort of the reevaluation of consent, then I think there's kind of a warranted concern about what that number is. And I don't know that any of us are geniuses at picking whether that should be 49% or 51% of the way to the next house. I guess I would suggest that maybe those two kind of work against each other, and maybe a best path would be to leave it as it is. I can certainly live with not redoing the consent after 5 years, but there's a learning experience. I mean, I keep hearing about this. We've had chickens all this time. Yeah, and we're here because on the small lots they cause troubles with neighbors. That's what our experience, at least in any kind of recent history, tells us. So I'm inclined to take this ordinance as it is written right now. At least that's where I sit, and I see these two kind of proposals working against each other a little bit.
To clarify, and you make a good point though, but actually what you're saying is that one really supersedes the other. That if the neighbors have all consented to where the coop is located, then it probably doesn't matter where it is.
That's what I'm saying,
That's
but
really
then
what
when you
you're saying.
follow it up with removing the idea that we're going to revisit the issue of consent, then to Greg's point, people don't know what it's like to live next to chickens. They don't understand what that is, and they may or may not like it after 5 years' time. So I'm okay with...
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, no, jump in.
I would say they might feel a lot differently after 5 years, not knowing whether or not the coop might get up and move to a different part of the yard.
Fair question. Would, in that situation, once consent is given for a location, is it contemplated that it couldn't be moved unless there was new consent? That was my understanding. You can't just move it without getting... I don't think Commissioner Rankin was talking about a different location. Whatever it was that was consented to would be the same thing. As I understood Commissioner Rankin's proposal, if nothing changed, no violations, the coop didn't move, no change in property ownership, then consent wouldn't be required. But to your point, if somebody changed their mind, you want to give them some window to say, well, you know what, after 5 years, I don't want it anymore.
Ideally, I'd like it to be less than 5 years, but yes.
We also have
I
the
understand
option
your
of leaving the ordinance as written, getting a year, 18 months of experience, and then, I hate to say revisit the issue, but we will have more experience. To your point, Mary, you're right, we do have some experience, but we don't have it on the smaller lot as conforming uses in our village. So, I see the merits of both sides. I do like the kind of the automatic renewal because there hasn't been any issue, but if there's going to be a conflict, I would rather go for consensus and the, you know, the positive affirmation of the ordinance, so then we can move on. I can go either way myself, but because I want to get it accomplished.
Understood. Well, I would support additional flexibility. That's what I would support. But if the majority wants to keep it as it's currently proposed, that's fine too, because I think to follow up on the spirit of what you said earlier, initial comments, I think we need to move this forward to conclusion, get it in place, and then have some real experience to report back 6, 12, 18 months from now, so we're not speaking in hypotheticals anymore.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of this is the fear of the unknown, so, you know, seeing how it plays out, maybe there's going to be 5 people who apply for a license, and we've, you know, been worrying about it and talking about it.
Right.
So,
Right. Exactly. Commissioner Olson, you're looking very contemplative.
Thank you.
I didn't know you wanted to say anything. I just wanted to comment on that.
Appreciate that comment.
Anytime. Other suggestions on changing any of the parameters that are out there other than what Commissioner Rankin's put forward?
No, I support.
You're looking contemplative too.
Yeah, thanks. I support what Becky said. And if we were to adjust the 5-year renewal to something during the trial period, the 2 years to what Greg has said, I could support that as well. I personally think, you know, going forward, years down the road, there probably won't be a renewal necessary.
So we could just leave it the way it is written now. Slam dunk it in a couple of weeks and move on.
And then 2 years from now, change the consent requirement once we find out there's nothing.
But that was one of
to
our
worry about.
previous.
I see what you're saying.
One of our previous conversations went down that road where we all talked about marking our calendars and things like that, because we do want to see how it goes and then make the option later on. You know, I mean,
Right.
I'm looking for the most affirmative votes. And I
Right.
think that if we can go with Commissioner Rankin's idea to have sort of a set policy for the next, you know, in 5 years from now, great. But I think there's one or two of us that might even before then say, hey, listen, it's worked or it's not worked. We need to look at this and figure it out and make the change from consent to non-consent or continue down the path that we have it.
Right. To your point, I think what I'm hearing, Commissioner Rankin, is much sooner than 5 years, we may be revisiting this, deciding whether consent's necessary at all.
and that's fine. You know, I can support I can support it as it is if that's what it comes to, but I just wanted to put that suggestion forward because I would prefer that it wasn't consent, but, you know, that's not the path that we've chosen as a majority. And so going down that path, I was trying to find ways that were a little more flexible. And that was behind my suggestion.
No, understood. Understood and appreciated, and I think you had 4 people supporting you. I think what Commissioner Newstead and others have suggested is that we revisit the whole thing much sooner than 5 years from now, and that may eliminate the need to even interject that flexibility.
Okay.
Which would be even better because we can interject more flexibility,
Okay.
which I would definitely support. So now we're back to where we were. Other comments, questions, change before I open it up for, so why don't I open it up for some public comment? And then we can discuss a little bit more. At this point, we'll take a pause and invite any members of the audience who would like to come to the podium, ask any questions, make any comments on what's been proposed or the discussion that you've witnessed, and we can always follow up afterwards. And again, the protocols, please come to the podium, give us your name and address, and we welcome hearing from you. Any questions or comments from the audience? Please.
My name is Kevin Miles. I live at 1231 60th Place. I grew up in a part of Downers Grove that used to be farm country. During the Second World War, I raised chickens to supplement my family's need for meat and eggs. As a result, I'm very familiar with the problems maintaining a chicken coop. Now, I must apologize that I wasn't familiar with this topic that the council has been discussing for the past year. I wish I'd been here 12 months ago. But I stand here very much opposed to any ordinance which would allow chickens in Downers Grove. I was surprised to hear that there were chickens for the last 30 years. They may have been. I'm not sure that that was a good idea. I'd like to read some of my reasons why I feel this way. I feel very strong about it. I have documents here that could be passed out to the council. Have you done that, Dave? Do you have them? Fine. Chickens are not a very domesticated animal at all. They're not really a pet. They're not like a cat or a dog. They don't experience any human interactions, and so hence you really are not really our pets. I'm not sure what the people who want hens think they are. And while it is true that hens, and you have it up there, are fairly quiet, cocks, and I use that word wisely because roosters is what you people would call them, but really they're called cocks on the farm, are very noisy. And it is very difficult, impossible for a layperson to be able to distinguish between a hen and a cock when they're chicks. Very skilled people can do this, but most of us cannot. And cocks are quite noisy. Thirdly, unlike ducks, which hide their heads underneath their arms during the winter, chickens don't do this, and are not winter hardy. As a result, during the course of a winter like we had this past one, they would suffer severely. My chicken coop was heated, had a little heater in it. Ordinary chickens, which you would have in Downers Grove, would not be heated. They'd be subject to 18 degrees below zero and would suffer terribly. I don't think that is what the council wants. Next, each chicken produces about 3 pounds of fertilizer per week. That amounts to 1 cubic foot every 6 months, which has to be disposed of properly. Chicken manure can carry any number of human pathogens and parasites, including Salmonella and E. coli. It is very rich in nitrogen, and as a result cannot be simply spread on your lawn, but has to be composted. As a result, this takes between 10 to 12 weeks before it can be spread around the yard. Now, I don't want to live next door to a fertilizer factory. I don't think it's appropriate to ask me. Next, chickens live about 15 years. That's long after the kids have become sick and tired, bored sick of having to worry about feeding them, watering them, getting into grout. Chickens eat more than feed. They have to have grout. That helps with their digestive. It's in their stomachs. At that end of that time, they have to be disposed of. Now, killing a chicken is not for the faint of heart, and it's not for family viewing. Even after you got the chicken killed, the next thing you have to do is, if you're going to eat the chicken, you're going to have to clean the feathers off the chicken. I don't know if anybody's ever experienced that, but that is one of the smelliest tasks that you can ever do. You put the chicken into a pot of boiling water, and if you've smelled wet feathers, which I'm sure you have if you have a feather pillow, it is terrible. I do not want to live next door to someone who is cleaning chickens in their backyard, 4 or however many they have. Now, a lot of people in Downers Grove spend a lot of time on their yards. We should be thankful for that. But I don't see how adding a chicken coop can possibly augment this. I doubt very much that chicken coops will ever be featured in Better Homes and Gardens. Now, there is a requirement that there is a consent that I have to have from my neighbors. Now, instantly, if I refuse, that makes me the neighborhood bully. I see that there's a limit on the number of chickens. I wondered whether you could have a dozen. Now, supposing I buy a house after this permit has been given, I buy the house next door, and I don't want chickens, but the chicken coop is there. What do I do then? Do I call the chicken police? How do we get ourselves back to where my rights are protected? I don't want the chickens, but the chicken coop has already been established by prior consent of the neighbors. And what neighbors do I ask? Just the ones next door? I see you have, including point to point. I'm not sure if that's the kitty corner ones back there. Back there could be 7 or 8 of them, actually. Could be a large number. Now, what happens? Who do I complain? I complain to if my neighbor decides to have chickens after I refuse to give my consent? Where do I go? I don't see any way of resolution of complaints listed up there. Pardon me my pun for saying, I didn't think you should duck your responsibilities on this, and by chickening out. Finally, if the council does allow chickens, I'd like to suggest, and I noticed that the ordinance says chickens up there, but the one in the minutes talks about animals. There are other favorite pets. For example, I've heard of piglets making wonderful pets. But then there always is pig virus. To this end, the National Geographic this past month, if you're familiar with it, has a lead article on the use of non-domestic animals as pets and the problems associated thereof. It's a serious matter, folks. You can't just bring pigs and things of this sort into your neighborhood. And lastly, just in case you think I may be horsing around up here, I'm going to come back in another year and ask if I can have a pony for my grandchildren. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Miles. Appreciate it. You may have established a new record for puns in any speaker we've had before us. Thank you for expressing your views.
Well, it's a very serious matter, and I want to...
It is a serious matter, sir. And that's probably why we've been talking about it for over a year. But thank you. Appreciate your input.
What was the, excuse me, Mayor, what's the date of that National Geographic?
It's this month. It's
Can I look at it?
Sure.
Thank you.
There's a picture of a bear.
Yeah, we're not letting that in.
I was going to suggest that to the council.
No.
Thank you, sir. Please.
Frank Falish, 820 Prairie. I have to take deference to the gentleman here because I lived in Chicago on a 30-foot lot, and we quite regularly got live chickens that my mother killed, she defeathered, and we never had any complaints from the neighbors. So I think that part is overstated because actually the feathers are not, there's not that many. And having a fresh killed chicken is good. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
May I respond?
Actually, no, sir. We're not having a debate. But I would like, other people would like to speak first, and after they've spoken, if you would like to add additional comments, please. But we're not encouraging debate amongst people in the audience. You might as well turn off the camera and just go outside and get a cup of coffee. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff. Bill Waldeck, 1409 Willard in Downers Grove. Wasn't planning on speaking tonight because I thought you already had written it up. But it scares me that you're talking about maybe elimination or considering changing the renewal of neighbor consent. First off, I agree with Commissioner Jose. Should always be located closer to the family that's raising the chickens rather than putting it on the neighbors. However, maybe a way around this is a conditional consent. When you go around and ask your neighbors to sign off for the 5-year period, maybe at that point, if the consentor has the opportunity, they may request that, okay, you can, I'll give you the okay if you locate your coop on the other side of the yard. So maybe allow conditional consent. The idea of eliminating a 5-year period, things happen in 5 years. You may get along with your neighbors now and things are going great and they go out and they get this coop and they're really the type of people that shouldn't have chickens or kids or dogs or cats or birds or anything. And you find out, like a neighbor found at the last chicken convention, chickens smell, chickens make noise. Maybe your child or yourself, maybe you're going through chemotherapy and you're worried about the health hazards. So things happen after 5 years. And so keeping that 5-year requirement, I think, is a good idea. I prefer to see 2, but you got 5, okay, 5. So I wouldn't make any changes to that. The other thing I was looking at was there's a lot of reference to the animal control officer, and during all these debates we've been talking, the chicken folks have been complaining about dogs and other animals. Oh, they're noisy, they smell, and those types of things. Well, you know, we have nuisance laws, and you talk about, well, if there's no violations, well, what is a violation? I think getting a animal control officer, whoever, on a weekend is going to be next to impossible. I think you have a lot of nuisance dogs and cats and other creatures in town, but these rules aren't enforced. And so when it comes to the chickens, they're not going to be enforced as well, especially when the enforcement process is harder. So the idea of having or saying you get a pass if you don't have any violations, I think there are a lot of violations going on but just go unreported. Or, as Village Manager Fieldman likes to say, we want compliance and not fines, et cetera. Well, you know, maybe there's this problem and you go for compliance after a long period. It's not easy. I mean, you know, the people that had the chickens had them for a long time, and when they got caught, it was very easy to catch them. They had a rule. You're not supposed to have chickens. They had chickens. Look how complicated it was to take them to court and go through the whole process. So this whole violation thing is kind of misleading because it isn't easy to get violations. Anyway, bottom line, keep the 5 years. Things change. If you have a bad owner, it's one way to stop it. Things change. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Waldeck. Other questions or comments from members of the audience? Good evening.
Hi. Leanne Lally, 4117 Highland Avenue. Got a couple comments and just a couple things I wanted to ask to be considered. One of the things I want to comment on is the fact we have been doing this for almost 30 years, and it has had relatively few problems. And I do kind of want to point out that most of the people who keep chickens in this village are doing it on lots that are too small. So the wonderful thing about passing this ordinance is they will be brought into compliance, and that's good for everybody. But the model that's been used is pretty much they've talked to their neighbors and their neighbors have agreed, and you know, in most cases it carries on peacefully. I have a thought about government, and that is that it should regulate only when necessary, and I get a little nervous when you guys want to get involved in conversations that should happen between neighbors, like where the coop could be placed, things like that. To bring my coop closer to my house would also bring my coop closer to both of my neighbors on either side of me. So generally speaking, a person's house is usually furthest from its backyard line than it is its two side yard lines. So in most cases, if the coop is toward the back of the yard, it's going to be about as far away from, pretty much equally far away from all of its neighbors, except perhaps in a case like you said where one side of the block has a very deep lot and the other side does not. But to that I would say that after the winter we've had, I wouldn't want to trudge 150 feet down to the back of my lot to go collect my eggs. Most people aren't going to purposely shove their coop a million miles away from their house and on top of somebody else's because it's just inconvenient. So, I mean, there's just so much that's common sense here, and, you know, you're just thinking too hard on this. You know, a lot of these things will just work themselves out because people have common sense. I wanted to ask if you might consider, since we already have a 50-foot consent, or non-consent, basically, if you can keep the coop 50 feet from your property lines, you don't need your neighbor's consent. I just want to throw out that what if my coop is now 50 feet from this neighbor? Do I still need their consent? I mean, could we make it possible that any neighbor that will be 50 feet or more from the coop, you don't necessarily need their permission, you don't need it now, so I'm not sure why we would need it in the new ordinance. And I don't know that this even affects me, I don't know that my lot's even that big, but it's just a thought that if you already can keep your chickens 50, if they can be 50 feet from your property lines, why not eliminate the need to ask that neighbor's permission? Like, say all your neighbors except one don't care for the idea and you can keep that coop 50 feet from their property line, why shouldn't you still be able to do it, you know? Because people aren't asking for permission for that now under the ordinance that's been working beautifully for the last 30 years. I was also wondering about the cost. If, when you renew in 5 years, are we paying the same amount of money? I'm just curious, or would it be like a lesser because there's less work involved, or maybe there's no cost to renew it? I don't know. It was just something I was curious about. I also was curious about, the thing about a coop is you can't just pick it up and move it necessarily because it has to be dug into the ground to keep it predator safe. And there might be people who have chickens right now whose coops are not 7 feet from their property lines. So I was kind of wondering if there was any grandfathering in if, you know, the existing neighbors are not having a problem with the location. And I think that's about it. I really do appreciate all the work you've all done on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments and suggestions both tonight and in the past. Other questions or comments from the audience? Good evening.
Hi, I'm Don Jankowski. I live at 1312 Blanchard Street in Downers Grove. I have a few comments to make, and I scripted them so I get through quickly. All right? So, first of all, I know that some very vocal people in our community have spoken against the new ordinance that would allow people in our community to keep small backyard flocks of poultry. Based on what I've seen presented by village staff and people who have kept flocks, the fears expressed by opponents are based on unfounded prejudices and fears. Our current ordinance, crafted over 25 years ago in response to a spat between two neighbors, is bad legislation, and it needs to be changed to allow homeowners in this community to make a reasonable choice. Let's look at the benefits of expanding the law to allow more people to keep a small flock of backyard poultry. When compared to commercially produced eggs, backyard poultry eggs are lower in fat and cholesterol, have more vitamin A, have more vitamin E, and are higher in omega-3 fatty acids. I can explain what all that means, but it means better health for people who have eggs from backyard chickens. That's a good thing for Downers Grove. The free-range eggs that are touted in stores are better than commercially produced ones, but pale by comparison to what backyard flocks do. Plus, backyard flocks are not fed antibiotics, which have given rise to antibiotic-resistant infections that are linked to 2 million illnesses and 23,000 deaths in the U.S. every year, according to the CDC. Frankly, there are many more reasons to not let people bring raw meat into their homes than to deny them the right to own a small flock. Even though raw meat is dangerous, we have procedures to mitigate that danger and serve the greater good. Keeping poultry responsibly will also serve the greater good. That's a fact. Many studies have shown when animals are around, people's blood pressure goes down, stress and anxiety levels are reduced, people feel less lonely and less depressed, and they tend to be more social and community-oriented. You can ask the residents of a retirement home in Hershey, Pennsylvania, that regularly receive visits from a therapy chicken. Their lives are enriched as a result of those interventions. I know that we are proud of being recognized as a green community. There is one huge advantage to family flocks that is often overlooked during chicken debates. That is their role and value in solid waste management systems. Poultry are biomass recyclers and can divert organic matter from trash collection in landfills. They eat just about all kitchen waste. If it's in your refrigerator and it's no good anymore, they're going to eat it. They do that. In addition to that, if you combine their manure with your compost in your yard, that doesn't go out on the curb. That ends up in your garden, and again, it's great for your garden. If we're serious about attracting more millennials, those are the young people, the 21 to 35, that we really need to live in our community, green sustainable initiatives like this one will put us on the map. Evanston allows backyard poultry without neighbor consent and has shown leadership in attracting the millennial demographic, which increasingly forms the backbone of our ever-aging labor force. If we aspire to continue developing our community to broaden the tax base, we need to show developers that we can attract millennials who employers need to fill out their workforce. If we can't find younger workers, we won't see economic development. And this is a millennial issue. I'm asking that you keep neighbor notification on the radar, as neighbor consent can allow a neighbor to veto choices of another neighbor arbitrarily. Requiring neighbors' consent without specific guidelines that apply to all is a civil liberties violation, in my opinion, and is offensive to the American way. You don't need a neighbor's consent to breed pit bulls, have machine guns, rev motorcycles, or have a house load of kids. We don't need that right now here, right? So why would keeping a small family flock need to be approved by some crazed, controlled, mongering, not enough to do neighbor? And I think they know who they are. So with that, I'd like to just leave you with a quote from the Wall Street Journal, which said, "Chickens suffer from a PR problem. People think they're dirty, noisy, and smelly. The truth is, a few cared-for hens are cleaner and quieter than one big dog or the 3 neighborhood cats that poop in the flower bed. Plus, you get eggs." And I think they were talking about your dog, Jeff. So, all right, thank you very much. Thank you for considering this.
Thank you for your comments. Other questions, comments from members of the audience? Please.
Good evening. I'm Dawn Susan Conters, 5709 Hillcrest Road. And I too wanted to express my appreciation for having these discussions and trying to get some progress to have a more inclusive chicken ordinance. With that said, I still feel this is a very restrictive ordinance, and I'm not sure if it truly is more inclusive. I think we have very deep lots where I'm at, 250 feet deep, and if I have to get consent from my neighbors who butt up against my backyard, who also have 250 feet deep lots, where my coop is located is easily 150 to 200 feet off their residence. Not off their lot line, but off their residence, 50 feet off their lot line. So that, I know one of the residents who spoke at the last meeting is one of my diagonal neighbors, and he still thinks I have chickens and still thinks they smell, and they have not been on my property for 14 or 15 months now. So I think that's an undue burden to try. Is that how this ordinance is written? Is that neighbor consent? So I would have to get 100% of the consent from those neighbors, and not like if I get one refusal, I can still proceed with, it's 100% consent. And I would ask if the council would consider a consent from the distance, if consent has to be written in here to ease concerns, a distance from a residence. So, if you're keeping your coop 75 feet off of somebody else's home, then, you don't have to get their consent. Or some distance, I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there. Also, as this is written, if we have like a vacant property, not next to my lot, but another neighbor was asking me this, you still need to get the owner's consent for that. And then also another neighbor lives next to a rental, and it looks like as this is written, that you need to get both the tenant who's currently occupying the house and the owner of that property. Is that right? Yeah, okay. So I don't know, I just sense a lot of fear about this, and so it feels like it's being over governed, and we're trying to write in all the minute details, and I'm not sure if this was brand new and we were the first community to be doing this, then maybe I could see a lot of the hesitation. But if you look at communities, small ones, kind of similar in size to ours, like Oak Park and Western Springs, Brookfield, Evanston has been mentioned, they're all successfully implementing this without these restrictions. The city of Chicago, which was mentioned, I think at the last meeting, as that we live not far from that, and why would our community want chickens? But actually, the city of Chicago has very few restrictions and allows, I believe, up to 10 or more hens. And they have very small lots, and it seems to be working in that community. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And again, just as a reminder, as I said earlier, I think Commissioner Rankin reiterated, there was not agreement on the consent point, but the majority, in order to go forward with being more inclusive at all beyond what we currently have, a consent requirement was important. So now we're talking about moving forward and what the details of that would be. But I mean, let's be frank about it. Without the consent, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But there was an agreement on that, but it's a compromise. We're trying to move forward in a compromise, and I think a lot of us, whether we agree or disagree with particular elements of this, would like for something to be concluded and passed, and then we can come back in 6, 12, 18 months and see if all this was just overwrought fear or whether there was actually something to it. But just so everyone understands that there are elements of this that I wouldn't suggest that there's complete agreement on a lot of it. This is an attempt to compromise by 7 different people with 7 different views in order to move forward with something. And as I think I said earlier, this is certainly a something that everyone is going to be unhappy with, but otherwise the alternative is nothing. Other questions or comments from the audience? Please. Good evening.
Hello, good evening. Vera Miller, 1331 Palmer Street. I'm here with my husband, David, and we are first-time homeowners. We moved to Downers Grove in July, and we just wanted to express our support for these amendments to the ordinance. Owning a few hens has been a dream of ours for a long time, and it's actually one of the reasons we moved here to Downers Grove, because we knew that some hens were allowed in certain conditions, but that it seemed to be moving towards a more flexible ordinance. So we're really excited about that, and we're okay with the notice. We're getting to know our neighbors and, the consent, neighbor consent. We're getting to know our neighbors. We look forward to talking with them about it. We're a little, or at least I feel a little worried about if we get a new neighbor and we already have the coop, as some people already talked about, and they decide they don't want to have chickens, once we already have them, that it would be difficult, hard for us to give up the animals that we've been caring for. So that's just one concern that we have about that. And I guess a question or clarification would be whether within what time period we would have to ask a new neighbor for the consent. If, it could be 90 days, they could have a chance maybe to see, what it was like living near chickens versus if we had to tell them right away. Or
if I can interrupt you, that's actually a very good question, because how would the owner who has consent know that the property changed hands? Particularly when you get to some of these multi-family units, how would they even know that there was new ownership?
The consent is only required at the time of the issuance or the renewal of a permit. Any neighbor moving in would not be asked for consent until the renewal period comes up.
That's the 5-year period. So you at least, and I think that's why 5 years was chosen, so that the economic investment would be at least you could at least get a 5-year return on it.
Thanks.
And then only upon the renewal would you have to go out, and it would be the property ownership of record as of that point in time.
Correct.
Okay, and I definitely support the 5-year period, just so we can have that security of knowing at least we can have them for that long. Then if there is anyone that has an issue, then we can deal with it at that time. Again, just wanted to express our support for this, and we're really excited about it. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, and I know Mr. Jankowski is smiling over there because you may be Exhibit A as evidence of what he was just saying a moment ago.
The millennial.
Well, I never say a comment about a woman's age. I know better than that. So I'll let you say that, Commissioner Rankin. Any other questions or comments from the audience?
Steve Connors, 5709 Hillcrest. And I know that I'm just repeating some stuff that I've already heard tonight, but, and I know that, Mr. Mayor, you've already pointed out that, that we wouldn't be moving forward without this consent. But at the same time, this is the forum that people have to express their opinion knowing how it's going forward. So I'm going to express my opinion that I do disagree with the idea of needing neighbor consent for a lot of the reasons talked about. And I do think that the renewal process shouldn't be based on consent either. It should be based on whether or not you're in compliance and if you follow the ordinance. If it's a well-written ordinance and you follow the ordinance, it shouldn't be about what the neighbor wants. It should be about what the ordinance is written for and that you follow it. That said, if consent is going to be part of this, I agree with some of the other comments that have been forwarded, that have been discussed tonight, that it seems that what would be fair is to have the consent based on the required setback, so that if people that are already beyond the 50 feet don't need consent now, you're actually making it more restrictive by requiring consent for those that are beyond 50 feet. So I think that it should be written to have consent for only your neighbors that are within the 50 foot, and those beyond shouldn't be part of the written. If this isn't part of what's moved forward, I hope it can be considered as, you know, if you do move forward and this goes forward for 18 months or 2 years, and then there's another discussion to possibly remove consent, I hope we can have that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate it. And I think there's almost been unanimous desire to check in on this after some period of time and see how things have been going, how many people have applied, what the experience has been. I think that may go a long way towards perhaps either confirming or modifying some previously held opinions. Other questions or comments from the audience before I turn it back to the village council for any further questions or comments? Okay, thank you. I appreciate everyone for coming out and sharing their views both tonight and in the past. Other comments or questions from members of the village council? Commissioner Durkin?
The current ordinance that allows hens on properties is not being changed. So what the current ordinance is still going to be there if you have a sizable lot that permits it today. That's not going to change it. Is that? Or is the whole thing changing 100%? Because there seems to be some confusion with that.
The setback requirements, for the 50-foot setback requirement will remain in place, such that if you can meet the 50-foot setback requirement from all lot lines on your property now, you can do so in the future. If you meet that condition, you don't need a permit, therefore you don't need neighbor consent.
Correct.
The other changes about the types of chickens, hens only, and the maximum, those changes would apply to all properties, including those that are allowed under the current ordinance.
Yeah, the only thing I would throw out, but again, I feel like we've got some kind of delicate balance of consensus here, and I'm reluctant to disturb it when we go forward. I think that 6 hens would be fine, but I'm not going to split hairs over 2 hens. I think I forget where I got that number from, but with some past experience, if I remember. I don't remember if it was the old ordinance or not. But I don't see anyone who's excited about adding 2 hens to the floor to make 6.
You know, I'm one who will support this only with the neighbor consent. I'm not a hen farmer. I have no intentions of being a hen farmer. But economically, does 4 hens make it economical to proceed with what is being desired here? The outcome is, the desirable outcome from what I understand, is being able to produce the eggs for self-consumption. Is that going to be achieved with 4 hens? I thought we allowed 8 hens at one time. It's always been 4 hens.
It's always been a maximum of 4.
I don't remember where I got 6 from, but if that's always been the maximum, and I'm not going to upset the apple cart, but to Commissioner Durkin's point, if someone does go to all this effort, and it's not just the effort of getting consent from everybody and applying for a permit, where a fee is associated with the permit, but then there's the investment in the coop, there's the investment in the hens, there's the investment in the feed, there's investment of doing all this stuff responsibly. That's why I think the 5-year renewal was important to make sure that there's some kind of ability to get a return on that investment. Although candidly, there's no profit making in this.
No, I'm not saying there is.
It's a desire to pursue a certain food source or experience. It's not something anyone's going to save a lot of money on it. That's not the reason why people do it. But I think 6, more than 4 would contribute to that economic return to the extent someone was going to make that investment. But again, if it's always been 4, and I don't know why, I thought I saw 6 somewhere, then, but I would throw that out as something as increasing it to a maximum of 6. But I'm not gonna, enough said, I would throw that out.
So you had mentioned, or some people in the audience had mentioned this concept of 50 feet. I mean, it's an interesting thought, right? I mean, our current ordinance says that you have to be 50 feet from every lot line. The coop has to be located 50 feet from every lot line. So if the coop would be located further than 50 feet from another lot line or residence, I think they were indicating residence. But even if it would be located 50 feet from a lot line, how would, I mean, I'm trying to kind of picture that in my mind. Could that be possible?
It is possible, and I actually, that would be fine with me too, but a lot of anything that would allow more inclusiveness would be fine with me. But I think that this, if I'm not mistaken, I think the scenario that was described was where someone, say, had a 75-foot wide lot, and it was, let's say, 150 feet deep, and they were able to, and they only had side-to-side neighbors, a rear neighbor, and then the 2 diagonal neighbors. And they were able to locate their coop 50 feet from everybody's lot line except one neighbor, and that neighbor consented. Do you need to get the consent of everyone else because you're actually either meeting or exceeding what their current setbacks are that we've allowed for over 25 years? I mean, my answer to your question, Commissioner Rankin, would be, I agree. I don't know why we wouldn't allow that. That would seem to be consistent with the existing ordinance, although I also understand that I think there's trepidation that's been expressed by a number of folks about any incremental inclusion without other restrictions. I think that's the path of caution that has been pursued. But to answer your question, that makes perfect sense to me. As long as the one person for whose property the 50-foot setback would not be met consented, why wouldn't that be equivalent? So you would have some combination of either meeting the existing 50-foot setback, or for any instance where that was not the case, you would have to have consent. And at least my answer to your question would be, to me, that would be the same thing as having it 50 feet away from everybody, because you've achieved what the purpose of the setback is.
And I'm certainly not trying to create a problem.
Sure you are.
Going.
Come on, we got a few more. We got the rest of the year to talk about this, right?
No.
But I think to that point, if our old house had a 132-foot deep lot, that then restricts, then you're asking more people. So it's, you know, some of the bigger lots, it's a little bit easier, but smaller lots would not be as inclusive. You guys all know my opinion. I'm not 100% in favor of the consent. That's why I keep saying let's pass it, move on, and then come back and hopefully maybe remove the consent so we don't have to worry about that. But I think at this point, while these are great ideas, maybe things to consider for the future. You know where I'm at and where I want to go.
One idea that was raised, I forget who exactly raised it, that I thought was interesting, was grandfathering those that currently have coops that may or may not be in compliance, if they're located in a spot that's less than 7 feet from a lot line. That's the kind of thing I might be able to get next to, but the 5 number's got to come down.
What 5 number? The years?
The 5 years. Now, it's one thing if you know, we're grandfathering folks, and it's 5 years is an awful long time. Is the bottom line.
Well, I took the grandfathering question to pertain to the coop. Right. It does not have hens in it.
Well, if you're,
I don't think there's any comment. Or go
at the point that you're going to place hens in it still has to be 7 feet from the lot line under this proposal.
The concept of grandfathering, also known as nonconformities, which we discussed last week in the zoning ordinance, is predicated on the concept of legally existing at the time it was constructed. So you have to be pre-1987 for that to be the case, given that our recent 50-foot ordinance was pre-1987. The remedy for putting a hen into a coop that doesn't meet the setback requirement would be a variation process, not a grandfathering process.
Got it. So, I'm sorry, then maybe I didn't understand the question or the comment that was made earlier. You're addressing a situation where someone has had a coop
That's 6 feet from the property.
6 feet from property line, gets the consent, but doesn't want to have to move the coop.
Correct.
And the answer was that would not be a legal non-conforming because it would have to pre-exist.
Right, it would be an illegal non-conforming.
It was an illegal non-conforming.
Right, which shouldn't have been there in the first
Gotcha.
place, right?
Yeah, I'll have to think about it. I hadn't thought about that issue before. Is there any support for increasing the number of hens to 6? I don't see any hands going up, so I guess that's no. Just wanted to ask. I didn't want to be called out for having at least asked a question. Thank you. Any other comments from the council with respect to any of the parameters associated with the proposed ordinance? Other than Commissioner Newstadt's admonition that we move this forward and get it done?
Staff has direction to continue forward with the ordinance as proposed tonight.
And Michael Casa has marching orders now to look for a farm-in fleet. I'm serious, they sell the hens there, and all the feet and all the coops. We don't have one of those except in DeKalb. Could use one here. DeKalb.
You have to give that gentleman back his magazine.
I am. Thank you.
All right, well, I think we've exhausted the discussion for now, but thank you for everyone who came out again for the ongoing conversation. Hopefully that, albeit slow, there is progress being made to eventually getting this finalized. And that's the end of our first reading?
Actually, we have one more
ordinance. My goodness, that's right, we have more.
The annual ordinance.
I can't believe you actually put that other one first.
Amending the Downers Grove budget for fiscal year 2013. Here to present information on this item is our Finance Director, Judy Butney.
Good evening, Ms. Butney. This is just
Good evening.
This is just the annual budget. Of what importance is this?
That's right.
Coming on the tails of. Please. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. There is no amendment required for the general fund in 2013 in spite of the costs paid out for the April flooding. The expenses came in within budgeted levels. The general fund revenues, however, were approximately $1.9 million higher than budgeted levels due primarily to sales tax, income tax, and building permits. Expenses in the transportation fund were $12,000 over budget. This amount is expected to be covered by PACE for the operation of the commuter shuttle. There are two amendments to two debt service funds to record the accounting activities that are related to the refunding of bonds. As you recall, there was a 2005 TIF bond refunding that requires an adjustment of $8,750,000. That refunding resulted in $478,000 in savings to the village, and an amendment of $2.4 million to the library debt service fund for the refunding of those bonds that resulted in a savings of $132,000. The stormwater fund also requires a budget amendment in the amount of $1,350,000 for the purchase of property made from the use of bond proceeds. And this was a timing issue. The opportunity to purchase these properties came up mid-year and was unbudgeted, but it was more cost-effective to purchase the properties and demolish the structures than to construct additional flood prevention measures and protect the properties. And finally, the risk fund requires a budget amendment of $800,000 for claims related to the village's worker compensation and liability insurance program. Just a reminder, as you know, the village is self-insured for this fund and acting as the insurance company and directly paying claims. These claims are unpredictable in nature and will exceed the budget in some years and fall under budget in others. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'm going to reverse the order just briefly and see if there are questions or comments from the council before going to the audience, because I think the audience might benefit from any such questions or comments. Questions or comments from any members of the council? Questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to the budget amendments? Thank you for explaining them so clearly and concisely.
Thank you, Mayor.
And that ends our first reading. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Well, that was very important, so I appreciate it. That brings us to item 10, the mayor's report. I have nothing to report other than I believe there are about 66 days left until the Rotary Growth Fest. And I'm just going to keep saying things that envision warm weather, and eventually we'll have it. That's all I have on my report at this point in time, other than, now let me add one thing. Last week, the DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference had their large drive down. They do a number of different drive downs to Springfield throughout the year. And there was one last week with respect to, there were about 50 different mayors, managers, and trustees that went down to Springfield to advocate for a number of different municipal issues. And I think I reported on a little bit of that before. I just wanted to mention that while we were down there, interestingly enough, I think I may have mentioned this when I was on the phone last week, that the City of Chicago pension reform bill was passed literally before our eyes that very day, just to show you how fast things can move when Springfield wants them to move. Although that only affected 2 of Chicago's pensions and didn't really solve all their problems. What it did do was it coincidentally brought a lot of attention to the issue with respect to municipal public safety pensions and the fact that we have 2 lines on a graph that are going the wrong direction, and in order for them to both be fair and also to be there for the employees, something needs to be done before too long. The good news is there was a lot of attention on that topic because of the timing and the actions that took place with respect to Chicago's pensions. And so I think that's good that both the public and the media are paying attention to it, because it is an issue that should be of concern both to taxpayers, municipalities, and the employees who participate either currently or will participate in those pensions. Because as I mentioned, I think it's very important that they're both fair to taxpayers, but also there to recognize the tremendous valued service of the employees themselves. So I'm glad to see that we're getting that kind of attention, and the goal of the organization amongst, as well as the Illinois Municipal League and other conferences of governments throughout the state, are to continue keeping a focus on that topic. And the other theme, as I mentioned, there were a lot of bills that are down there that threaten our self-determination, our ability to manage within our means and levels of service in our own communities what we want to do. And our message there in a number of different bills was, please, Springfield, do not put these obstacles in our way, preventing municipalities, both administration and elected officials, to work with residents within their means, such as the budget items that were just talked about by our finance director, to make things work up to the expectations of our residents. There seems to be a penchant of Springfield to pass regulations from afar that have an immediate impact on us and take away our ability to do things in the interest working closely with our constituents without providing any funding or ability to counteract that, and that's going to be very frustrating. So we'll continue to stay on that, and I know everyone gets the updates as to what status of the various Senate and House bills are, but I just wanted to point that out. So I didn't have a report in there, I just gave you a long one. So my apologies. That brings us then to item 11, manager report. Mr. Fieldman?
Metra will begin work on the Main Street train station platform tomorrow. The village will be providing updates on this construction activity on our website, and you can also check out our Twitter feed and follow us on Facebook. So for updates, please check the village website. That's all we have.
Are there going to be any, what I'd really like them to work on is being on time, since they were late both this morning and today in my transit here. That would be the first thing they could work on. But on a equally serious note, are we going to have any signs or anything on the platform itself for commuters who, I don't know if they're like me, but if they haven't had a cup of coffee yet, they may be, that commuter tunnel vision, and may not be focused on what could be a disruptive situation they may encounter. And given the heightened level of anxiety and frustration with Metro service right now, I wouldn't want that to spill over to our peaceful borough here, because the station is located here, and I saw the markings this morning and can see that that's going to be fairly disruptive. So people can understand when they're actually on site what's going on, as I doubt they're going to take the time to visit our website.
It is significantly disruptive once this construction gets going, and yes, there will be signs, and it will be augmented by their Voice of Metro system as well. The village has been providing input on the communication activities. It's something that I think we do pretty well. Metro's been receptive to that, so there will be a village touch to the communication efforts, and Metro's been very nice to partner with us in those efforts.
I appreciate that. I'm just acknowledging that there's a I know Commissioner Jose will probably back me on this one, there's a very heightened level of anxiety and frustration right now with the train riding commuters. I don't think that's any secret, but...
And I think that's putting it very politely.
I'm being about as polite as I can get. With the disruption of the platform, I can see that being associated, and so we got to be prepared as much as we can. I know you are, but mark my words. Thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us to item 12, Village Attorney's Report. Ms. Petrarca.
Thank you, Mayor. Only one item to present this evening. That is an ordinance providing for an amendment to ordinance number 5286 in the Village of Downers Grove budget for fiscal year 2013. That is all. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. We cannot adjourn tonight. We do need to convene into closed session to discuss collective bargaining issues. So I will ask for a motion at this time to move into closed session pursuant to a state statute that Commissioner Newstead is going to read.
Mayor Tully, I move to convene into closed session pursuant to Section 2C2 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act to consider collective negotiating matters between the village and its employees or their representatives. So moved.
Questions or comments for anyone? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner